They said she crossed a line, that she cared too much. And in the kind of place where numbers mattered more than people, that was the quickest way to get yourself pushed out. For nearly 3 years, Emily Harper showed up before the city woke. While office towers still glowed with the soft light of cleaning crews, she moved through polished hallways with quiet steps, her cart rattling just enough to remind herself she was still there. She wasn't just wiping down desks and emptying trash cans. She was keeping order in a world that barely noticed she existed. Her schedule was simple. Come in before dawn, leave before the suits arrived. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. And in a city where steady was rare, she held onto it like it was gold. Until the morning she started noticing him. A boy with deep brown eyes, no older than 7, sitting in a corner of the executive floor, with a backpack bigger than his frame. He didn't belong to the cleaning crew, that much was obvious. He belonged to someone far more important, someone whose name was on the building. Emily hadn't meant to talk to him. She wasn't supposed to. Rules in a place like this were clear. Staff kept their heads down, their eyes lowered, and their conversations short. But rules are easy to follow until you see a child trying not to cry over a broken action figure. She remembered kneeling down beside him, her voice low, careful, almost like approaching a skittish bird. "Want me to take a look?" she'd asked. He'd nodded without meeting her eyes, and in that quiet moment something shifted. She fixed the toy's arm with a dab of glue from her cart and tied a scrap of cloth into a cape. His smile, slow but real, was worth more than any paycheck she'd ever taken home. She didn't know then that this boy's world would one day fall into her hands, or that caring for him in small, invisible ways would be the very thing to cost her the job she needed, and lead to the night that changed everything. From that morning on, Emily started to notice him more. Not in an obvious way, just in the little details she'd learned to see after years of watching without being seen. The boy's name was Noah. She'd overheard it once, spoken by the tall man in the tailored navy suit, who always seemed to be rushing between meetings. His father. The man who signed papers that made other people's jobs vanish or appear. The man everyone called Sir without looking him in the eye. Noah wasn't like his father. Where the man moved quickly and spoke in clipped sentences, Noah lingered in doorways and spoke softly, as if testing whether the world was safe enough to hear him. On days he came to the office, Emily would catch glimpses of him sitting at a small table near the corner window, building cities out of coloured blocks or sketching superheroes in the margins of scrap paper. She never pried, but she noticed things, like how he rubbed his chest when the air conditioning blasted too cold, or how his breathing sometimes caught after running down the hall. She'd grown up with a younger brother who had asthma, so she recognised the signs even before the small inhaler appeared on the desk beside his drawings. It wasn't her place to say anything, and she knew it. But not my place was something Emily had never been good at. She began doing tiny things no one would notice, adjusting the thermostat when the room felt too chilly, making sure a water bottle was within his reach, switching the harsh overhead lights for the softer lamp in the corner. Little gestures that took seconds but left him calmer, more at ease. Noah started greeting her after a while, first with a shy wave, then with quiet questions about the things on her cleaning cart. "What's this for?" he asked one afternoon, holding up a bottle of glass cleaner. She smiled, telling him it was for making windows so clear you couldn't tell they were there. "Kind of like magic," he said, his eyes lighting up. Emily didn't realise how much those small exchanges mattered, to him or to her, until the day someone else noticed too, someone who didn't see kindness as a good thing, someone who believed rules were more important than people. And from that moment, the quiet connection she'd built with Noah would be turned against her. The warning came wrapped in a smile that didn't reach the eyes. It was from Marissa Cole, the executive floor's gatekeeper. She ran the reception desk like it was her personal kingdom, deciding who belonged and who didn't with a glance. Most people stayed on her good side. Emily had never been on it. One afternoon, as Emily was emptying a trash bin near the conference room, Marissa leaned over her desk and spoke just loud enough for others to hear. "You seem to be spending a lot of time near the kid," she said, her tone casual but her gaze sharp. "Might want to be careful. We wouldn't want anyone to get the wrong idea. Emily froze, the bag of crumpled paper still in her hands. She knew what Marissa meant. She also knew there was no way to defend herself without making it worse. So she nodded once, kept her voice even, and said, "Understood." But inside, her stomach knotted. After that, she tried to keep her distance. She still adjusted the thermostat when Noah looked cold, still moved his water bottle closer when his breathing seemed tight. But she did it quickly, quietly, like a shadow passing through. Noah noticed the change. A week later, he found her in the hallway and asked why she didn't talk to him as much anymore. His face held that puzzled look kids get when they sense something is wrong but can't name it. Emily knelt down, forcing a smile. "Sometimes grown-ups have silly rules," she said, "but it doesn't mean I don't see you." What Emily didn't realise was that Marissa wasn't done. She'd been watching, waiting, and when she finally found her chance, she took it. It happened on a Thursday evening. Emily had left a small note on the corner of Noah's father's desk, nothing more than a gentle suggestion to keep an eye on the boy's breathing when the air got too dry. She thought it might help. She thought it was harmless. By the next morning, that note was sitting in Marissa's hands, and the story she told about it would change everything. The call came before Emily even finished her morning rounds. She was told to report to Human Resources, a place she had only been once before, to sign her hiring paperwork. The walk down that hallway felt longer than she remembered, like every step was carrying her towards something she couldn't undo. Inside, a woman in a grey blazer sat with a folder open in front of her. Marissa was there too, leaning back in her chair with the calm satisfaction of someone who knew the ending before the story began. "Emily," the HR manager began, her tone polite but distant, "we've received a report about your interactions with the son of one of our executives." Emily's stomach sank. She listened as Marissa painted a picture that didn't match reality, saying she'd been overly involved, leaving personal notes about a child's medical condition, and creating potential liability issues for the company. Words that made her small gestures sound like dangerous infractions. "I wasn't interfering," Emily tried to explain. "I just noticed he was uncomfortable sometimes. I wanted to help." The HR manager's expression didn't change. "We appreciate your intentions, but it's important to respect boundaries. Effective immediately, you'll be reassigned to the night cleaning shift, limited access to the executive floor." Emily sat there for a moment, letting the words settle. Night shift meant no daylight, no casual greetings from the security guard downstairs, no quiet moments passing Noah's corner table, no chance to even wave goodbye. When she returned to the supply closet to collect her things, her eyes fell on the little drawing Noah had once given her. A stick-figure superhero with a cape, holding a broom like a sword. She took it down and slipped it into her bag. That evening, she walked out of the building at sunset instead of sunrise, blending into the crowd on the street. She told herself the distance would be easier, safer. But as the days turned into weeks, she realised she wasn't just missing the boy. She was missing the part of herself that had started to believe she mattered. She didn't know it yet, but the night shift wouldn't keep her invisible for long, not when Noah's world was about to crack open, and she'd be the only one close enough to catch him. The night it happened, the rain had been falling for hours, that steady, soaking kind that blurred the city lights and made everything feel quieter. Emily was halfway through her shift, moving between darkened offices, when she caught a faint sound beneath the low hum of the ventilation. At first she thought it was just water dripping somewhere in the garage below, but then it came again. Not water. A voice, small, strained. She stilled, listening harder. It was a child gasping between words. Without thinking, she left her cart by the elevator and pushed into the stairwell, taking the concrete steps 2 and 3 at a time. The heavy door to the garage creaked as she shoved it open, letting in the damp air that smelled of rain and cold metal. The space was dim, shadows stretching between concrete pillars. And there, near a black sedan parked close to the wall, she saw him. Noah stood beside the car, clutching his chest with one hand, the other braced against the door. His backpack lay open on the ground, pencils and papers spilling out, and his inhaler had rolled a few feet away. Emily's heart kicked hard against her ribs. "Noah!" she called, her voice echoing across the empty space as she ran toward him. She dropped to her knees so they were eye level. His breaths came in short, panicked bursts. Between gasps, he tried to speak. "Dad ran upstairs. Said he forgot. His badge and laptop. Told me to wait here. But my chest..." He broke off, pressing his hand tighter against himself. Emily glanced at the inhaler, then back at him. She reached for it, checking it quickly, and guided it to his mouth. "Slow," she said softly. "Just like we practiced with Captain Lightning, remember?" It took more than one try, but after a few careful breaths, the wheeze began to ease. Relief hit her fast, but she kept her voice calm. "You're okay, I've got you." She stayed beside him until his shoulders loosened, one hand steady on his back. Somewhere behind them, quick footsteps slapped against the wet concrete. Emily looked up to see a man in a rain-soaked dress shirt rounding the corner, his face pale with fear. "Noah!" he called, the sound sharp and breaking all at once. And in that moment, the man who'd barely noticed her for 3 years finally saw her. Crouched on the garage floor, holding his son as if he were her own. Daniel Hale, the man whose name was etched on the glass doors upstairs, dropped to his knees beside his son. His tie hung loose, his sleeves were rolled high and rain dripped from his hair as if he'd run through the storm without a second thought. "What happened?" he asked, his voice low but urgent. His eyes moved quickly between Noah and Emily, trying to piece together the scene he had stumbled into. Emily kept her tone steady, the way her mother used to when emergencies demanded clear thinking. "Asthma attack," she said. "He dropped his inhaler. We used it, but he should still be checked." Daniel nodded, brushing damp hair from Noah's forehead. "You saved him," he said, like the words had only just formed. Emily shook her head. "I was just here when he needed someone." But Noah, still leaning against her, looked up at his father and whispered, "She's the one who fixes things, Dad. She always knows when I can't breathe right." The truth in his small, uneven voice seemed to land harder than anything Emily could have said. Daniel's expression shifted, not just relief, but something closer to recognition. The echo of sirens grew louder until the paramedics arrived, moving with brisk efficiency to check Noah's breathing, oxygen levels, and pulse. Emily stepped back, letting them work, though every instinct told her to stay close. One of the paramedics glanced her way. "You did exactly the right thing. Might have kept this from turning much worse." She nodded, uncomfortable with the attention, and began to move toward the stairwell. But before she could slip away, Daniel's voice stopped her. "Emily," he called, standing now with Noah in his arms, "come upstairs tomorrow. I want to talk." It wasn't a request, but it didn't sound cold either. There was something in his tone she hadn't heard before. An invitation, maybe even respect. Emily didn't answer right away. She simply nodded once, then disappeared into the stairwell, her pulse still racing. She didn't know it yet, but the conversation he wanted would change far more than her shift schedule. The next morning, Emily almost convinced herself not to go. It wasn't her shift. She wasn't even supposed to be in the building during daylight anymore, but curiosity, and a little fear, pulled her back. When she stepped off the elevator on the executive floor, the air felt different. People were gathered in the main conference room, not just the suits, but security guards, receptionists, and maintenance workers too. It was strange to see them all in the same place, like some invisible wall had been taken down. Daniel stood at the head of the long table. Noah was next to him, clutching the action figure Emily had repaired weeks ago. When Daniel saw her lingering in the doorway, he paused and motioned for her to come in. "I want to tell you all something," he began, his voice carrying over the room's quiet. "Yesterday, my son had a medical emergency in our parking garage, and someone in this room, someone most of us have overlooked, kept it from becoming something far worse." Emily's first instinct was to step back, to fade into the wall like she always did. But every eye was on her now. "Emily Harper," Daniel said, his tone steady but warmer than she'd ever heard it. "You didn't just save my son's life. You've been looking out for him quietly for a long time, and I didn't notice. That's on me." There was a murmur through the room, some surprised, some guilty. Emily felt her throat tighten. "I want to make something clear," Daniel continued. "Taking care of people is not a distraction from work. It's the most important work we do, and Emily has been doing it without recognition, without expectation, and without complaint. That changes today. He gestured for her to join him at the front. Her legs felt heavy, but she walked up, her eyes fixed on the floor, until Noah stepped forward and wrapped his arms around her waist. The applause started quietly, one person, then another, until the whole room was clapping. It wasn't loud or showy, it felt real. Emily had spent years making herself invisible. And in that moment, for the first time, she realised how it felt to truly be seen. When the clapping faded, Daniel turned toward her, his voice steady, but carrying a note that felt almost personal. "Emily, I'd like you to take on a new role here," he said. "Something we've never had before. Someone whose job is to look after the people who make this place run, not just the executives, everyone." The words hung in the air. For a moment, Emily thought she'd misheard. She was a cleaner. She didn't have a fancy degree or years of corporate training. "I'm not qualified for that," she said quietly, almost to herself. Daniel shook his head. "You're more than qualified. You've been doing it all along. You notice things no one else sees. You fix problems before they become crises. That's a rare skill. And it matters here, more than I realised." From the corner of her eye, Emily saw Marissa shift uncomfortably in her seat, lips pressed tight. But the rest of the room seemed lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. "I want you to think about it," Daniel added, his tone softening. "We'll create the position together. No titles that box you in, just the freedom to do what you do best, take care of people." Emily felt the pull in her chest, part fear, part something warmer. She glanced down at Noah, who was still holding her action figure like it was treasure. His small smile told her everything she needed to know. "All right," she said slowly, "I'll try." The room broke into applause again, but this time it wasn't just for the rescue in the garage, it was for what came next. The idea that maybe a place like this could care about more than just the bottom line. Emily didn't know it yet, but the weeks ahead would test her in ways she hadn't imagined. And they would prove that changing a company's culture wasn't about grand speeches. It was about the quiet, consistent work of making people feel seen. Emily's first day in her new role felt nothing like a promotion. There was no corner office, no shiny nameplate on a door, just a small desk tucked in the corner of an open space, a stack of blank notepads, and the freedom to move anywhere in the building. She started the way she always had, by noticing the security guard on the night shift who looked more tired than usual, the accountant who kept checking her phone with a worried expression, the intern standing by the printer pretending to read while he waited for the courage to ask a question. Instead of rushing past, Emily stopped. She asked the guard if everything was okay at home, and he admitted his daughter was sick. She left a fresh pot of coffee in the break room for the accountant and slipped her a sticky note with the number for the company's emergency childcare service. She walked the intern through the print settings so he wouldn't have to ask again. They were small moments, the kind most people wouldn't think twice about. But in an office where people had learned to keep their heads down, even the smallest act of care felt like a shift in the air. Word spread quietly. Maintenance staff, who had never been spoken to by executives, started getting friendly nods in the hallway. People began to linger in the break room a little longer, sharing stories instead of rushing back to their desks. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by her desk. "I've been hearing things," he said with a faint smile. "Good things." Emily shrugged. "I'm just paying attention." He leaned against the edge of her desk. "Exactly. That's what we've been missing." His gaze shifted towards the glass wall of the conference room where a meeting was breaking up. "Culture doesn't change because I say it should. It changes because people feel different here, and that starts with you." Emily didn't know how to answer, so she just smiled. But later, as she walked through the building, she realised she could feel it too. A warmth where there had been coldness, a little more humanity in a place built on numbers. And it was only the beginning. A year later, the building didn't feel the same. The polished floors and glass walls were still there, but the coldness that once lived between them had faded. People actually stopped to talk in the hallways. Birthdays were remembered, new hires were welcomed, and no one was invisible anymore. Emily's desk had moved, not into an office, but into a small, bright room off the lobby. A simple sign on the door read Employee Care Centre. Inside, there was a couch for anyone who needed a quiet moment, shelves stocked with snacks and tissues, and a bulletin board covered with thank you notes from every corner of the company. Noah visited often, usually after school. Sometimes he'd sit on the couch doing homework. Other times he'd run in just to tell her about his day. He'd grown taller, more confident, and carried his inhaler without forgetting it. But he still had the same deep brown eyes, and that habit of noticing little things, a skill Emily liked to believe she'd helped him sharpen. One afternoon, Daniel stopped by with him. They stood in the doorway for a moment before stepping inside. "We were just talking," Daniel said, "about how different this place feels now." He looked around the room, then back at her. "That's you, Emily. You've done more than improve morale. You've made people believe they matter." Emily shook her head with a small smile. "I didn't do it alone. I just gave people permission to care out loud." Noah grinned and added, "And you fix things, even when they're not broken." It made her laugh, the kind that rose from somewhere deep and genuine. She glanced over at the shelf where Captain Lightning still sat, cape slightly crooked but holding strong. It was more than just a toy now. It was a reminder that the smallest acts, a repaired arm, a glass of water, a few words at the right time, could ripple out further than you'd ever expect. As they left, Emily stayed behind for a moment, letting the quiet settle. She thought about the girl she'd been the night she was sent to the night shift, invisible, careful not to be seen. And she thought about the woman she'd become, still careful, but never invisible again. Because once you start seeing people, really seeing them, you can't go back. And when you make space for others to be seen, you change more than a company. You change lives. Kindness may not always be recognised at first. It may even be misunderstood or criticised. But when you lead with it, without expecting anything in return, it plants seeds that can change lives, cultures, and even the way people see themselves. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is pay attention. Because the moment you make someone feel seen, you give them something they might carry for the rest of their life. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very last moment of this story. I'm truly grateful for your time and for sharing this experience with me. If you enjoyed it, please give this video a like and don't forget to subscribe to Rain Inside for more heartfelt stories. I'll see you in the next one.